I have the whole world in my hands. Abigail spoke of this day my entire life. You were supposed to be a man of the people. Then why weren't you listening? Hear them now, John! They wanted me! They needed me! This was supposed to be a prophecy fulfilled. But instead, it's my grandest failure. I've heard for so long, I can't remember what it's like to feel. But now, it's time to rewrite my own story. Let me in.
Absolute desperation mode right now for Becky Lynch. She has got to escape now. Somehow.
Was trying to get to the ropes, but she could be down to the canvas. Wait a minute, covered by Lynch. And she has beaten Shayna Baszler. Claymore! A fourth Claymore! Drew McIntyre fulfills his destiny. McIntyre is WWE Champion.
And the new WWE Champion, Drew McIntyre!
I don't know what I just saw.
You're very welcome into this week's edition of the Off the Top Rope podcast here on Off the Ball, where we're looking back at 2 nights of WrestleMania and also the fallout in the Raw after WrestleMania as well. We'll be taking a look as well to see what's going to happen with WWE in the future. They have advertised a pay-per-view to take place next month, Money in the Bank, despite an entire lockdown and filming at the moment in Florida. And they've also announced that they're going to have a SmackDown this week as well, despite widespread reports that WWE have no material taped as of us recording this podcast on Tuesday evening. Joining me to take a look back at 3 pretty manic nights are Michael Verney and Richie McCormack. Gentlemen, good evening to you.
Evening, Will. Evening, Verney.
We'll throw across to you, Vern Gagne, first of all. What were your thoughts in a general sense about the 2 nights of WrestleMania 36 we've just watched?
It was weird, wasn't it? Took me a while to get over the fact just that there was no atmosphere. I love the atmosphere. I love even the vibe. And even when you're maybe even doing something else during a match and you can hear kind of a crescendo building up as the match comes to a close, and there was none of that, and just some of the audibles even that you could hear in matches that you wouldn't normally hear. I thought in the Charlotte match it was particularly noticeable.
That was really off-putting.
Grunting and everything just the whole way through. It was very strange. I thought they would have went hard at the opening on Saturday night to draw people in. I didn't think they did. That tag match didn't really do anything for me, to be honest with you. It's funny, we talked about the possibility of what could light up the 2 shows, and it was the 2 really properly pre-recorded segments that were away from the arena and had a chance to build their own sort of an aura and atmosphere, and that's really they were the 2 main takeaways from the Saturday and Sunday nights.
Yeah, I think so, Richie. I think when they embraced the bollocks over these 2 shows with their Sons of Anarchy style performance on Saturday, and what I thought was just outstanding, the Firefly Funhouse on the Sunday, which we'll dig into in more detail, I think that was the highlight of the 2 shows and probably what people will remember.
It is, and they're the 2 standouts, and they are that for a reason. I saw quotes from Ric Flair, of all people. The one thing you'll always hear the cornets of this world saying is that, you know, this was never Ricky Steamboat and Ric Flair in 1984. They'd never be engaging in this kind of nonsense. Whereas Flair's watching this going, like, listen, if you're a 12-year-old tuning into this, if you've gotten the network free for the first time, or if you're a youngster tuning in for the first time, and you see that's your entry point to wrestling, you're going to be hooked. You're going to be like, what is this? This is class looking. Like, we all, as like 8 and 9-year-olds or whatever, younger people, got into it via the more stupid and hammy kind of stuff, and then developed your own tastes and what have you down the line. So I think they made the absolute best they could with those 2 matches. We figured last week that they'd be off-site, kind of kooky little things, and they absolutely were. The execution of them was pretty decent in both instances. I'd have misgivings about both, to be honest, but I think generally they pulled it off, and they were by far, I think, the highlights of the entire weekend. There was a couple of low points as well, which we'll get to. I've had a couple of questions about that as well from people who've listened into the pod, and yeah, up and down. But again, like Verney says, the lack of atmosphere was just an absolute killer, and it ruined a lot of moments that should have been bigger, and it's something I guess we did anticipate last week.
Okay, before we break down through the card, Richie, what was your highlight of the weekend of what we saw?
Boneyard match, I think. Yeah, I'd have that over the Firefly Funhouse because there's an element of letting go of all you know about and all your preconceptions about professional wrestling that has to go into watching the Firefly Funhouse match, and it didn't leave me cold. I appreciated what they did, but for the Boneyard match, I was great to see that Taker again. There are elements of it, like him suddenly disappearing, coming out of the grave and being behind AJ Styles, that I could have done without. They could have done in a slightly more realistic manner. But yeah, I think the execution of that for me was probably the best of all. I really like the idea of an Undertaker that could show up, have his bad points and his aging, I guess, covered up as best they can, and use him to the best of his capabilities and the best of their capabilities as regards editing techniques and pre-records and all that kind of stuff. Like that biker Taker stuff is made for that, and there's plenty of mileage in that kind of stuff down the line, whereby he can almost use it as a kind of wrestler's court, and anybody who transgresses on the roster, blah 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 blah. Like something for Seth Rollins down the line when the Monday Night Messiah becomes too much, then he can take his retribution in the Boneyard. That kind of thing. It lends itself quite well to that. Whereas I don't think he could do that many repeated offerings of the Firefly Funhouse and be accepting of it.
Mick, we kind of wondered if this was going to be the Undertaker's last WrestleMania, given how well this has been received on a critical sense in terms of the way fans have reacted to it as well, given that you can accentuate the positives of his character and maybe hide some of the negatives of his age. We might see a few more years of Undertaker if they can try and pull something like this off every year. Yeah,
I'd say we probably will, and I'd say this sort of thing, like the more than the streak staying going and the WWE absolutely milking as much as they can out of it, I'd say they'll milk this Boneyard match for the next couple of years, definitely. And I know we'd one listener on about the possibility of a Sting versus Undertaker dream match in a Boneyard match, which could, their limitations in the ring and their age and athletic kind of capabilities kind of letting them down, that kind of goes out the window in that sort of a match. So it would really work in a Boneyard match. And like, is there anyone maybe apart from like someone like Bray Wyatt that would be better suited to facing the Undertaker in a Boneyard match? Only Sting, with the darkness and everything that comes to it. I think something like that would be class. And I think, yeah, you're definitely looking at probably another 2 or 3 minimum years of the Undertaker fighting at WrestleMania anyway, in that type of a setup.
Yeah, they can't milk that dry. That's for one thing. Anyway, they can't do it, I think, a couple months down the line at SummerSlam or something like that. I think it's one that they have to reserve for once a year, and that has to be okay. Not pulling them out in Saudi Arabia to do a botched chokeslam and a pin from there. Like, they have to just keep it as is, and I think if they do that, they're sweet.
A lot of credit as well, Richie, for that has to go to Kurt Angle, because apparently Kurt was the guy who said to the Undertaker AJ Styles would be the perfect opponent, and apparently this has been going back months that they were thinking about this Boneyard match, because Angle was talking to Undertaker was very annoyed, didn't want to be remembered for his match against Goldberg in Saudi Arabia, and said he wanted to go, at least give himself a chance to go out on a high. He probably has extended his career by this, but at least now we can kind of put that match against Goldberg, which was an absolute botch fest in Saudi Arabia, into the rearview mirror.
Yeah, it's amazing. We've come out of this WrestleMania and the 2 best received matches are both putting matches with Goldberg out of the recent memory, which is possibly what the 2 main performers in each of them will have wanted. It shows that somebody who's smaller and can bump for Undertaker is probably his ideal opponent now, and not a slightly immobile, overly muscular 50-odd-year-old who, in the case of Goldberg, that's what we had, or someone like Braun Strowman, who you might have seen back in the day as an ideal. He was basically put up against his cavalcade of monsters for years, was Undertaker, where if you look at his best matches, they're with the likes of Shawn Michaels, they're with the likes of Mick Foley, they're with the likes now of AJ Styles, who are all smaller men but can put a fight to him and take bumps along the way, and in specific scenarios can equal his performance.
Mick, when it comes to this Boneyard match as well, AJ Styles hadn't had the best run of WrestleMania matches. His match against Orton was okay last year. Didn't have a great match when he started off against Jericho when he first joined the company, and a lot of people were very disappointed by the match between himself and Shinsuke Nakamura 2 years ago in what was effectively the main event for the SmackDown title. I guess this redeems his WrestleMania legacy just a bit as well. This is his best WrestleMania match so far.
Yeah, and just on what Richie said there as well, like, he was the one taking all the significant bumps throughout the match as well. He was the one. It was like Bret Hart fighting, someone much bigger and less mobile years ago. He did all the work and made the Undertaker look very, very, very good along the way. A couple of issues I had with the match. at the ending of the match, like I'm a farmer and we've often filled in different things with loaders of tractors. There was in no way enough dirt in that loader to cover one body, let alone his whole body and his hands sticking up. Number two, when all the masked men were circling the Undertaker, it just amazed me, and it's hilarious in wrestling. And when you show it to someone who doesn't watch wrestling, and they're like, why didn't they all attack him at the same time? Why did they all attack him individually? And just maybe the OC were probably made look pretty weak. Like Gallows and Anderson were probably made look pretty weak and disappeared off the scene.
Well, Carl Anderson might be dead.
But like they're going to be like, look at Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson were in the main event of a WrestleMania. Like whatever way they slice it down the line, they're going to be happy enough with that. And if Vince is still doing payouts the way he used to do payouts, then they're after walking away with a fair few quid, especially for the quote unquote danger money, I guess, that would associate doing a match like this. So I think that they look like chumps. They've been made to look like chumps for the last couple of years, to be fair, but they've been made to look like chumps in the main event for WrestleMania. So I don't think it's much harm for them.
Yeah, I get the feeling that these guys were definitely on the AEW radar at one point. They signed these lucrative contracts. They get to hang out with AJ Styles, who's one of their best mates. They're obviously getting decent enough paydays, and they seem to really enjoy what they do as well. So I think there's worse ways probably to earn your money than what the OC are doing at the moment. I suppose just to dig down towards the rest of the card then, Mick, we started off with that tag team match, which you said made you feel a little bit cold in the end. Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross, we kind of speculated maybe we're going to have a breakup here. Instead, they've got the titles on them.
Yeah, I remember Jim Ross talking about Eddie Guerrero being in terrible form backstage one time. I think he opened a WrestleMania one year, and JR
I think it was 21.
Yeah,
I remember
21.
Watching, yeah.
JR told him, like, he sold it to him, it's like, you can have the crowd hot for the whole night. And that's what I was expecting. I was just expecting something that would, obviously there's no crowd there, but something that would get people wanting to continue watching. And I just felt the Saturday night kind of dragged as a result of that. And it was a bit the end of it. Maybe it's because there's no crowd and you don't sense things coming as much. But the end kind of came out of nowhere a bit for me. And yeah, we were kind of predicting a possible, the two of them possibly separate, and now they're tag champs. So it's an unusual one.
Yeah, you've got the ultimate separation angle down the line. We'd a texter onto us there earlier on, or somebody on Twitter was asking for like stuff that could have been covered, or we should cover in the pod. James McGurk was asking, Bliss nearly completely missing Sane with the twisted Bliss was quite something when you consider this was all pre-taped and they had umpteen opportunities to reset and do that again. She gets her legs. I'm just like, lads, it's the first match. It's the first finish of the first match. You can change it. And they absolutely probably should have changed it and maybe not make her look as unaccomplished. I think Alexa Bliss is fine in the ring. She's no great shakes, but she's no poor performer. But it's little bits and pieces like that I think they could have tidied up in post, as they say in the biz.
It's really strange. They could have possibly even changed the camera angle on that. They showed it from the ugliest possible angle, and it just screamed botched straight away. There's probably a few more we can talk about later. Definitely the crash mats being left out during the ladder match was a particular problem when Uso, as he was called throughout the match, he didn't even get his Jimmy Uso for most of it from the commentary team, went out over the top, and they cut to a wide angle where the crash mat was there, which he landed on. They cut back into the ring. You could see the crash mat was gone. So obviously that match was definitely shot in a few different sequences, so they made the most of it. But bizarre, Mick, that they didn't cover that botch up. Did you spot it first time round?
No, it was only the second time I watched it, and it's funny, like, given that it was from the top rope and everything, it's actually even easier to cover it, or even easier to do it again. Like, it's amazing that they didn't do it again. It's the sort of thing that'll be gone, as you were saying off air, it'll be gone from the network from now on. They'll make that little edit, or they'll improve it somehow, or improve the angle or something like that. But it's very strange when you have a chance to make everything as perfect as possible that you don't do it, particularly at as Richie says, like the finishing move for the end of the first match on the show.
Yeah, Richie, where did the Kabuki Warriors go from here? Because Asuka's used again in a singles environment on Raw. She was in the singles environment on SmackDown as well. There are some rumours about Kairi Sane's contract being up at the end of this year. She could potentially go back to Japan. What do you think happens with the Kabuki Warriors from here?
I can see them going their separate ways. But then again, looking at the way Asuka was used last night on Raw, she was used to make Liv Morgan look strong in defeat. So she's going to be somebody who, I guess they used to call him a carpenter, somebody who can, pick up a win here and there, but make somebody look good in doing it because he's that good a performer. I think Sane's probably going home. I've always got that inkling that they didn't know how to properly use her. They stuck her in an all Japanese tag team because why not? It's ended up working. I thought they were a good pairing, but yeah, I prefer to see Kairi Sane somewhere where her talents can shine. Who knows? She might bob down to NXT again. I know she recently got married as well back in Japan, so that might be a factor in what she's thinking. But the fact that she didn't show up the next night on Raw suggests to me that we may be seeing them go Splitsville, which would be a disappointment in its own way, but I can understand it.
Yeah, Mick, on to the second match then. We've got Elias and King Corbin, which was set up by the big fall that Elias had to take last Friday night. There was question marks over whether he'd be able to compete. Of course, he was able to come out, and in the end, he wins with a roll-up in what for me felt like a pretty nothing match over 9 minutes.
Yeah, he'd no strapping or taping or anything on. I like when they sell an injury from before. Like, you remember, like Triple H used to always have kind of white bandages around his ribs when he had a bad rib injury or got a belt with a sledgehammer or something like that. It was a life-threatening fall. They could have at least sold it at the pay-per-view. Yeah, no, this was pretty inconsequential. Like, and Corbin's song backstage beforehand, I don't know what that was. It was awful, and that kind of represented or gave you a fair indication of what the match was going to be like. I think Corbin's a decent worker, but this was just a not a match really, just a bit of filler on the card.
Yeah, what do you think, Richie? Is this feud going to carry on?
From their own point of view, it probably gives them something to do, but I don't think it's a watchable feud. I don't think you're going to be tuning in going, oh, I wonder what's going to happen next between Elias and Baron Corbin. Baron Corbin's, he is skirting that line of having go away heat, whereby people just don't want to see him on screen. Never mind want to see him lose. X-Pac heat. You're looking at him going, I can't be bothered. Would you fuck off? Like, just go away. He's in that danger spot when I think there's actually much better within him. And I'd hope he doesn't get looped there, because if he does, it's a dangerous place to be. Whereas Elias, I think, is probably on borrowed time.
Okay, jumping forward, because we have a lot of matches to look at here. I was massively disappointed, Richie, with Becky Lynch against Shayna Baszler. Firstly, because I thought everything storyline-wise should have been set up for a Baszler win. But yeah. I thought, again, for the second time now, after that triple threat at the tail end of last year, there seems to be zero in-ring chemistry between these two.
Yeah, that's an issue. It's something you would have figured they'd flag up beforehand, like long beforehand, that this is going to be a problem. Specifically because they did, they can have a run of them on house matches and see how it goes. Maybe perhaps not because they're looking after a WrestleMania card, but you can try these things out. You can put them in another triple threat on the road and see how they go. But like, they had poor enough chemistry. Becky picks up the win. She's now tweeting today that she's like 365 champion, and you can see the reasoning for that, yada, yada, yada. The main upshot we got of it on Raw was a pre-recorded reaction promo from both of them, where Becky does her Becky promo and Shayna has this like scripted nonsense about, feeling the pain of her defeat. And so obviously they're going to be meeting up again down the line. But for me, like we mentioned it on the show last week, like it didn't make much sense for Becky to win that match. It made all the sense in the world for Shayna to come off beating, umpteen other women in the Elimination Chamber match, to running through the NXT Women's Division for a year, coming to WrestleMania and beating their champion and coming out of it looking like an absolute $1 million. Like, a defeat to Shayna Baszler would not have hurt Becky Lynch in the slightest. She could have had that match, given them 15, 20 minutes, make her look, get all her stuff in, have all the personality in the world that she does, and come out of it and still be, Becky Lynch, and that's fine. But you would have had somebody to chase then in Shayna Baszler, whereas now you're like looking at it going, why do I want to watch another fight between these two? Like, it wasn't as if there was a botched finish or whatever at the end, or I know it was a roll up, but it wasn't necessarily, Baszler tapping, but still, like, what's the hook? Why do I need to be bothered about this, going forward? And if Baszler does win then in their next encounter, then it needs to be in a kind of creative fashion, because her just going in there and then knocking the crap out of her for 3 minutes and winning, which is probably what they'll do, is just using their thinking. It defies all sense for me.
And Mick, in terms of thinking on this one as well, for a year people have bemoaned that the women's division has been about just Lynch and Charlotte, and they win all the time and they're continually pushed. And what happens at the end of this two-night WrestleMania? Both Lynch and Flair are holding titles after beating probably the two most legitimate people to be built up.
Yeah, I think we probably called the Flair win because that's invariably what always happens in any big matches she has. But I didn't think Becky would win. I thought the finish was a bit bizarre as well, because from the way I was looking at it, it looked like Shayna Baszler's shoulder was just up off. I thought it was a dodgy kind of a screwy finish like last year's WrestleMania, and now it's like Becky has 2 title wins at WrestleMania against, former MMA stars, so to speak, and they're both a bit kind of ropey, and even Shayna Baszler was showing her arm to the referee like that, and I thought that was going to be part of a storyline, or was going to be some sort of thing, or maybe that she's beaten 2 UFC stars or 2 MMA stars at 2 WrestleManias and they've both been suspect finishes, but it doesn't look like we're going to see anything like that. I just thought it was... it could have been, again, I thought it could have been executed better, considering they had several goes at it and not just one go at it.
Yeah. I think the slightly fortuitous finish to both matches is something, and the echo to last year is probably something that they've done on purpose, and I think we're probably going to see some level of recall for it down the line. But like, nobody's looking at that. Like, everybody last year kind of went, I thought Ronda had her shoulder up, and there were enough question marks coming out of it that you thought about it for a while, and you went, but Becky's champion, that's grand. But then you're like, no. I think this time, I don't think it's that obvious a shoulder up to think, oh, well, Baszler probably has enough cause to go and chase Becky for this. You're kind of looking at it going, all right, they've beaten her. Now what? Oh, brilliant, Nia Jax is back in the scene. We're going to get to suffer like some, really botched forearms and punches between her and Becky for the next while. I'm like, you've got some really awesome people around you. They're after seemingly bringing up Bianca Belair as well. I don't know if that's a permanent thing, but they seem to be, I'm not saying botching the division, but they're getting enough wrong that it'll make you worry.
Yeah, the feeling I got was that the finish wasn't necessarily setting up that this is a repeat of year on year. It was, they very much were getting over that, Becky Lynch found a solution when she was at her lowest point, and she was able to use her ingenuity in order to get out of a bit of a situation and to win. Again, though, Richie, we talked about this last week about Shayna Baszler. I am left so cold by her outside of her in-ring stuff. I thought the promo that they recorded, which is clearly on a DSLR straight after WrestleMania on Saturday night, but just her repeating the fact that, the pain of my defeat, and I'm basically going to get one over you again. I can't warm to Baszler as a character at all.
Stick her with Heyman. Oh my God, stick her with Heyman. She's absolutely calling out for something like that. She'd be $1 million with Heyman. She just needs to do the same shtick that Brock did, which is just stand there, bounce, and look menacing, and kind of grimace every now and again. And that's, to be honest with you, that's enough for her. Like, there's enough to suggest, looking at what happened without getting ahead of ourselves as regards Brock and stuff, that Heyman could just pivot and decide that he wants to put an arm around this warrior, this fighter, this absolute killer machine who is coming into a new world, and he wants to guide her through shark-ridden waters, yada yada yada. If not him, then somebody of that ilk, somebody who can talk her up rather than relying on really stilted delivery of scripted lines that don't do anything for her at all, like in the slightest. That promo afterwards that they recorded in the hallway, it was just, again, I want to be invested in a Shayna Baszler match. They're doing all they can to make sure that I'm not going to, which is just weird.
Yeah,
it's funny, if you're talking about re-energizing a division that should be giving us more, something like that would definitely re-energize it, because immediately you're thinking, okay, maybe Lesnar's going to take a holiday for a while now, reroute him, and all of a sudden all sorts of possibilities start opening. Not only is he getting heat for her, he's getting heat for everyone else, he's making everyone else more important in the division as well. So I think something like that would be class, especially with Charlotte going down, possibly going back to NXT, and there's lots of great matches and great kind of feuds there, but there's kind of a bit of a missing kind of a link at the moment, and as we've seen in the past, he could definitely fill that void.
Right, so then, lads, we get into that point of the show, which is effectively title after title after title. We've just been talking about Becky Lynch defeating Shayna Baszler. Then we had, Mick, the Intercontinental match, Sami Zayn with Cesaro and Shinsuke Nakamura in tow. Cesaro had already beaten Drew Gulak on the pre-show, up against Daniel Bryan and his protege, Drew Gulak, as well. And Gulak is kind of acting as a kind of an in-ring coach during all this as well. I guess we thought this could be a good match because you're talking about two really good workers. Again, I thought this one was pretty flat, though.
I actually quite enjoyed it, to be honest with you. I didn't we expected a bit. I quite enjoyed it. Apart from the fact that Zayn kind of looks like a homeless man going around the place. He looks like he I don't know what he's been doing during the virus or what's been going on, but he looks like he hasn't shaved. He looks like he hasn't worked out too much either. But I kind of like. I think so too. Yeah, I kind of as I was watching the match, I was just kind of thinking, okay, Zayn is taking an awful lot of punishment. He's definitely going to win this. Bryan's very good at just making making anybody look good, I think, as well. Like it wasn't an outstanding match like that. I thought it was like maybe, just below 3 stars out of 5 or something like that. But the right result, in fairness. Brian still comes away looking strong. I think he still made Zayn look pretty strong as well. And it was a decent match. I thought it was the one match where they created a bit of an atmosphere, or there was at least things going on at ringside to just get away from the fact that the place was kind of soulless.
Yeah, this is one of those matches, and I think it was the first one that jumped out for me that definitely would have benefited from having a crowd there, because you're looking at it and on paper you're kind of thinking that there isn't much of a backstory there. It almost seems semi-cobbled together, but if you had got these two in front of 60,000 smarks, essentially, that you'd have in Tampa, I think it would have gotten over huge, and you would have ended up remembering this match as being one of your highlights of the weekend, whereas it's just among the many that you kind of shrugged your shoulders at and went, yeah, it was decent, yeah, grand, yeah, okay, fine, what's the next one,
Yeah, I think Sami Zayn kind of looked like a homeless Prince Harry by the end of the match. Slight similarity.
Give him time, Will.
Give
it time. Prince Harry's going to be homeless himself. That's what happens when you extricate yourself from the royal family. He's going to get King Ralphed.
In terms of where this moves forward, Richie, I'm guessing we can probably have this chase go on for a little bit longer. I'm guessing Daniel Bryan will probably get a rematch. And again, this will probably play out for a few more months yet.
I think it's an ample opportunity to push Gulak up into that kind of realm of thinking, and I think him at some stage walking away with the belt down the line after they've had him with Bryan for a while, and after they get over his personality, like the personality that he showed in 205 Live, like a year or so back, was just phenomenal. Like he was going for this ground-based offense when he was surrounded by high flyers, and he was doing like a semi-political kind of thing as well. Like there's a bundle of personality there. If they manage to get it out in the right way, they could have a genuine proper star on their hands. It's just people of his size are just usually badly handled by that company.
Make another match, I think, which would have benefited from having a crowd, because there was a few good spots in this match, and the action was pretty intense at different stages as well. We had 3 competitors up for the tag team belts because we knew The Miz wasn't involved. So for reasons, we've got 3 guys fighting, basically representing the teams.
We're called it due to circumstances, Will. That was the entire weekend. Due to circumstances. We've been in an empty shed putting all these matches together.
And again,
Not
I noticed
the coronavirus.
No mention of coronavirus whatsoever. Stephanie did 2 monologues, no mention of it. It was these troubled times, I think is how she put it on Saturday.
It's on Vinnie Mac's banned list now.
Don't call it a belt. Don't call it the coronavirus.
This is not wrestling. This is sports entertainment.
They're not going to a hospital, damn it. It's a medical facility.
A medical facility, yeah.
In terms of this next match, though, Mick, we had some good action in this. You've got John Morrison defending successfully for the team of Morrison and Miz. Jimmy Uso is representing the Usos, and we also had Kofi Kingston in here. I thought it was crap during the match, though, that they pointed out that Kofi Kingston probably had the biggest moment of WrestleMania last year, and here he is now, very much in the lower mid card in a thrown together tag team match.
Yeah, it's mad. It's very strange kind of thing. It's what we all think. It's like when I was doing a Zoom live with the Eat Sleep Wrestle Repeat group, and we were saying Nakamura 2 years ago was in a title match, and now he's out here standing around. It's not usually the sort of thing that's mentioned on commentary, because it totally buries someone, really. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Which was very strange. I tell you what, one of my main takeouts was. Since he always had star power, but like, John Morrison is jacked. He should be in like world title matches. Like he's whatever like bit of like size, maybe not that he had a size differential or anything like that before, but he's huge now, having not really lost much of his mobility or the kind of his dynamism as well. I think like it's a no-brainer if they. Well, I say that it's a no-brainer. It probably won't happen. It should happen that he's in around the title picture within the next, 9 to 12 months. I would hope that it would. I was so very surprised at the finish. Like, as somebody said on Twitter, in a match where you were supposed to climb to win the title, the winner of the match won because he fell. Yeah, which I thought was a bit strange. I was thinking a lot of time to plan the finish, and it was just a bit of a kind of a hokey kind of a finish. But there was some really good spots in it. Before the match, you're kind of thinking, yeah, this could be as good as you think it should be, just because of the 3 lads that are involved. It's just a very good 3-way ladder match. It would have benefited from a crowd. I think the right winner or winners, in fairness. But again, I just think Morrison, it's destined to have a better singles run this time than he had the first time around.
I don't know, like Morrison's never been able to cut a really good interview. He's improved. There's no doubt about that since he was away in Impact, especially. But like, there's always that level of disconnect as regards his personality and likability factor, wanting to glom onto him, whether it's a heel or a face. My favorite bit of the match was the quite obvious Denver Broncos moment that they had on commentary, whereby Cole kept talking up Morrison's parkour offense, and then quite obviously in a voiceover room afterwards, like, parkour is where they use every part of the environment around them to try and launch themselves. I was like, oh, come on, you couldn't make it less obvious than that. But yeah, like, and again, the finish makes me wonder, do you remember that tug of war that they had between Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar over the belt a couple of years ago? Like, does that mean that under these rules that we saw tonight, that whoever came away with that belt that night would have been having bragging rights to it, or does it need to be suspended in a little clip above the ring first? Because the falling and them all having it at the same time and then one coming away with it seemed like, oh, we've added in this rule. This is, an interesting one. And fourth note in this match, I didn't expect to have a fourth note in this match. I hate JBL. Like, with all of my life, I hate that man. And I hate when he showed up on commentary on Saturday, I was like, oh, Jesus. As if the spectre of having this in front of nobody wasn't bad enough. Having that foghorn, leghorn, Republican, Trump, Farage-loving gimp calling matches, I was just... It took me a decent hour to recover, and then it brought me back down to earth when he rolled out on this one as well. I was like, Jesus Christ. So yes, woohoo, JBL. But yeah, I think Morrison is probably the deserved winner of this one, and it was an enjoyable match all round, apart from the obvious edits audio-wise, and apart from the crash mat on the outside too.
Yeah, Mick, in terms of JBL, I'll admit my heart sank ever so slightly when I saw it was going to be JBL and Maggle throughout the night.
It's a big match, Maggle.
And like, it was so clear that JBL, and I know he's been away from the commentary booth for a while, is paying no attention to the current product whatsoever. He added absolutely nothing through the commentary at all. This was kind of the worst of JBL when he was really phoning it in towards the end of his run as a SmackDown commentator before.
Yeah, it's kind of like a lad, covering a GA match or something like that, and he hasn't covered a match all summer, and there's been 6 or 7 matches already, and he's just making generic kind of statements that, to anybody that's been paying attention, they don't really make sense, and you're like,
that's Will. That's what Will does on the radio all the time. It's a bit close to the bone, Mick. I don't think you should be saying it straight to his face on Skype. That's a bit below the belt. Jesus.
It's funny actually that you say about JBL, because I ended up watching the making of JBL, a little video on YouTube. It was like when Ron Simmons got fired when he lost a match, and JBL ended up coming back, and he basically, Heyman fired Simmons but didn't fire JBL, and then all of a sudden he appeared on SmackDown the next night with I actually like the music, in fairness. I do like the music, because I'm from a farming background. I like that music. But he just turned into this character, the stockbroker, the businessman, the Republican, as you say. He's not a particularly likable character, and I don't know why they wheeled him out for Mania. Usually you're wheeling out your best at Mania.
Because he's available, Maggle. I'm available.
Richie,
he's big match, John.
He's big match commentator, John, in terms of this weekend as well. Was Corey Graves badly missed over these 2 nights as well?
I've kind of worn thin on Corey Graves. He got a little bit too fond of himself. There was a point where I actually thought he's bringing something fresh to this, and then they spread him too thin. They had him on both shows for a while, and it was too much. And then from that point on, he got a real sense of himself, and he became a bit grating. He would have, for damn sure, he would have been a better call than JBL, but I'm sure they had their own particular reasons for lumping him and my midget me, Pete Rosenberg, in the green screen studio. Yeah,
story was apparently he was in self-isolation at some point, I think a couple of weeks ago, and that's kind of why it went this way. But Mick, we had another match after this, which I actually thought was quite interesting in the end. Kevin Owens up against the Monday Night Messiah himself and Seth Rollins. We were bemoaning last week that Kevin Owens doesn't get enough wins at WrestleMania, so he gets 2 in one night.
Yeah, funnily enough, I had a tweet written out. It was like, "Hey Vince McMahon, hey at Vince McMahon, you've had weeks to plan this. And you finish in a DQ. What the F?" And I just lucky I didn't press send on it. I was actually very happy with the way it turned out. And in fairness, Owens in particular is the one guy that he's just so intense that there actually doesn't need to be. If the crowd was there, it would be even better. But he creates kind of an atmosphere himself, in fairness. And like it was good to like that was probably the most memorable moment apart from the boneyard of the first night was. I think it was a leg. I think it was a leg drop. Leg drop / elbow drop.
It was a drop.
It was a drop.
And in fairness, that was pretty cool. And just even the promo he cut on set to come back down to the ring, I thought was good as well. It added something to it. And the second half of the match was actually quite good. I thought that was one of the better matches on the opening night.
Yeah,
they need to be really careful. Yeah, they need to be really careful how they handle Owens from here on, because if they do it right, and if they manage to keep him hot without overusing him, they could have the hottest babyface in the company on their hands by the time they're back in front of crowds, and the reaction to him could be absolutely massive if they do it right. And I think with Heyman looking after Raw, there's every chance that that's actually going to happen, and I will keep my fingers crossed that does remain the case. Again, like, it was probably the second most enjoyable match on Saturday night's card. I don't know if you heard what he originally wanted to do, his fall. Apparently there's going to be like a pirate ship as part of the set. In Tampa, he wanted to jump off that, which would have been infinitely higher, I'd imagine, than the actual sign that we got in the Performance Center. But he wanted to come down off that, so he clearly had a couple of moments set out in his head, a couple of spots that he wanted to get in and really shine. And I think he did. And I think again, it's one of these cases where defeat doesn't hurt Seth Rollins, not in the least bit, especially the manner of it. And I think both of them can have a decent war continuing on down the line, and I'd be more than happy to see it.
Yeah.
Just on the pirate team as well, boys. I thought that was really weird. I thought the musical package leading into the two nights was very strange as well. It was like there was this weird kind of voice going through it as well. I just didn't think it made much sense compared to what they usually do, which is usually it's usually really well drilled, has a good team to it. I didn't. It was like the second night. It was about 7 or 8 minutes before, when it hits 12 o'clock, you're ready for it to go. It happened 2 or 3 minutes and the show starts, and it was about 7 or 8 minutes before I got into it with a lot of this weird kind of crap going on, which I thought was a bit strange.
Yeah, I got the impression, lads, that it was basically a case of they got a guy who could do a Jack Sparrow impression. They couldn't get their deposit back when they already had him booked, and so it was like, right, we're just going to go with this.
But it's not a Jack Sparrow impersonation, just a bad Keith Richards impersonation.
Yes.
Like, I mean, I could have done it.
Go on, Richie, sell it to me.
I could have sat here in my room and been all like, we've got the women's title match between Becky Lynch and Shayna Baszler. That kind of stuff would have been great crack. But I think they sold it on the fact that it was in Tampa. They were in, I think it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Stadium is where it was going to be. So they were playing off that whole, Tampa Pirates, that whole thing. And once you stick it in a shed in Florida, it doesn't necessarily work as well.
Kairi Sane probably missed out as well. They could have had a pirate intro for her potentially, which would have been fun. That could have been the exact pirate ship that Kevin Owens could have jumped off 25 minutes later.
Wow, we should be writing the show.
We should. Give us the book.
Week, boys. I said this last week.
Send the tweet, Verney. Send the tweet now. Just go, dear at Vince McMahon. We should be booking this shit. You are old. What the heck? I can't believe you're going to say heck in a tweet as well. This is wrong.
Well, Kevin Owens gets his win over Seth Rollins. Again, it plays into Monday night, which we'll talk about a little bit later, that now Rollins is going to be this new determined character to try and get some revenge back on Kevin Owens in the coming months. So it's an interesting simmering rivalry between the two, which has been extended by this match. The first fall was a DQ after Seth Rollins hit Kevin Owens with the bell to try and get out of a situation where it looked like he was going to lose the match, and then Owens came back in a non-DQ situation and won after that drop, where I think the leg and elbow came down at the same time on the commentary table, and eventually Kevin Owens got a stunner to win the match after 17 minutes. So the next match we had on the card, lads, was extremely short. Came in at just over 2 minutes. Probably exactly what we expected, Richie, as I see you shaking your head in the background. Yeah. Braun Strowman gets his win, as I predicted last week, when there was no reason for Braun Strowman to win. Now is the time to put the belt on him. And he gets the win against Goldberg after a finisher fest.
Shite. Just utter shite. Like, we knew that this wasn't going to be what Pritchard would jokingly refer to as your 18-star, Tokyo Dome match. Like, we knew that. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. But when it's not necessarily even Goldberg, when it's a problem with Lesnar matches as well, there's such a finite moveset. There's zero psychology goes into this thing at all. Like, zero. It's just move, end. And like usually it's like 1 or 2 moves. And basically for this to be a bunch of spears and a bunch of power slams, like, Christ almighty, like, it's just so pointless. And like, ultimately, and I know they're all props, yada yada yada, like, ultimately a belt is supposed to be, or a championship, sorry Vince, is supposed to be something that means you're at the top of the profession or you're at the top of the company, etc. Like the fact that you can just do a couple of power slams on a 50-year-old man doesn't necessarily suggest that you're any great shakes, even if you are 7 foot tall and can grunt, even though you can't really grow a proper mustache along with your beard. Like it's just they're awful matches. There's nothing to them, and they're awful matches for the fact that they add so little to the story of either person that it just makes you not want to see either one down the line.
Mick, it was Greyberg as opposed to Goldberg. I'm surprised that he didn't get a little bit of colour put into the beard or even into the grey hair all over his chest as well. We saw the mid-50s Greyberg in this.
Yeah, it doesn't exactly make him look like as strong, shall we say, as it should. Like, they should be doing everything to make him look like an unstoppable kind of beast. Just on Braun as well. The power slam is a really shit finisher. At least when the Bulldog used to do it back in the day, I always thought there was a fair bit of venom in it. I still didn't think it was a finish. But it's a really shit finisher to win a world title with, realistically. Funnily enough, when Braun was coming out, the lads that I was watching and were just saying that I must go back and do it and look at his big matches and his demeanour coming down the ramp. They were like, look at this guy, smiling from ear to ear. He's definitely getting the W. So I must go back and look and see if it's blatantly obvious in other matches that he's lost, big matches, that he's going to lose coming down the ramp. But you have the world champion now, who's basically been kind of jobbed out for the guts of the last 2 years and has lost again, like Bray has up until the other night, has lost nearly every major feud that he's been in. So yeah, it's not exactly, your world title should be your strap, should be your marquee man. And
it's your championship, Michael, God damn it.
It should be your marquee man. He should be unstoppable. You should be able to think of all these brilliant feuds that are going to, when things get back to normal, are going to sell out arenas again. And he's not going to sell out any arenas, basically because of what's happened in the last 18 months to 2 years.
And
it's amazing that they've taken somebody like Braun Strowman, who's like knocking on 7 foot tall, who's built like a brick shithouse, and built him into the point where like nobody really cares. Like you've already turned him in, like he's so overexposed that he's heading down very quickly, like Big Show territory, and whereby you're just like, oh yeah, Grant, oh he's big, all right, Grant, fair enough.
Don't ruin the Big Show out just yet, Richie.
Oh, God damn it, I will, especially after last night.
We're going to see the Big Show again because he's got something to promote. In terms of just the matches as well, lads, like the OSW review guys would always say, damn it, D'Lo at this point, just in terms of the booking. But something that really stands out here, the two big sweaty men win the titles in Braun Strowman and Drew McIntyre in two matches for the main championships, which were effectively the same match over the 2 nights. It was just spamming finishers for the whole match.
That's the thing, and that's my problem with these matches, is that they were basically the carbon copies of one another. They were, painfully short and just finisher, and the zero psychology involved in either one. Like they're the kind of matches that you play out on SmackDown versus Raw on one of the really old versions of it, where you've just gotten the game and you're kind of getting to grips with how to play it, and you're like, oh, he does this move, I'm just going to keep doing it over and over again till I win. And we're in kind of computer game booking, and it's really annoying and really lazy more than anything else.
I think since they built Lesnar up into the unstoppable kind of force, these are the matches that invariably happen. Like, everyone forgets, like Lesnar could still have a good 20-minute match with lots of different types of ground assault, area assault, different bits going on outside. Whereas over the last couple of years, they've just built it into, okay, he hits 10 Germans, he hits 4 F5s, and then whoever he's fighting does something similar, hits 5 spears or whatever, and that's just that's kind of the way it's gone now. And it's like they think that's what people want to see in a world title match, and it's miles away. But when you're booking those sort of guys in the world title matches, that's invariably what you're going to end up with.
It worked when they had Lesnar and Goldberg a couple of years ago. Like, I think everybody went into that match thinking, oh Christ, that is going to be an absolute nightmare to watch. And it was so short and so well executed that everybody came away thinking, oh, that's grand, they did that right. When you start doing that over and over again, it's just like any kind of sense of wanting to see that match is just gone. And you don't want to see Brock Lesnar down the line. Like, they say he's an attraction. I don't see how anymore. They say Goldberg's an attraction. Like, really, nobody wants to watch a Goldberg match anytime soon. Nobody wants to watch a Goldberg feud anytime soon. It's just like they've made who should be the top guys in the company really nothing.
We may as well jump forward to that title match from night 2 as we begin our look back on Sunday night show. if we finished up with this, what was very strange for me, at least, Mick, and I wrote this in the Off the Ball review on Monday of the two nights as well, it was very unusual to see the Royal Rumble winner actually go on to compete for the main title in the legit main event, the match to finish the show, and also the Royal Rumble winner to win. It seems like it's been quite a while since this has happened.
Yeah, there's been so many different swerves or lads losing their opportunity at the next pay-per-view, or it turning into a three-way match or something. It's been very rare that it's just gone quite seamlessly, and he'd no obstacle to overcome. And even as the match played out, it was a very simple match. There was no like big story for him to overcome. There was no like obstacles put in his way during the match or anything like that. Or they could have built it up a bit. Like, something could have happened early in the match that could have maybe handicapped him throughout the rest of the match, and he could have overcome something or something like that. It was just a very basic big man match, as we've talked about already. Loads of finishers, and yeah, it just for his moment to kind of happen like that, it's disappointing. He's not going to get, like, Drew McIntyre's not going to get a moment like that again. He's never going to win the title for the first time ever again, and it's just kind of disappointing that it played out like that. And it was kind of after the Firefly Funhouse match, it was kind of just the night kind of finished on a damp squib. But invariably, if you look back over the last 4 or 5 years, as WrestleManias have gone on, invariably the best thing has usually come before the main event in recent years.
Richie, I'll admit I fell asleep, so I had to get back up and watch this match. I actually fell asleep. It beat me just
4 minutes long.
I know, and that's the strange part. I fell asleep just after the Firefly Funhouse, and then we were having we had the moment with Titus, and that's the last thing I remember before I fell asleep, because I'd taken the laptop out at that stage. And
that's a great image to have before going to sleep, in fairness.
There you go. And
just Titus going, what did I just watch? Why is Titus there?
Because Gronk was running away with the 24/7 title.
No, but why did he hang around and go, can I do the next link? Is that okay? Do you mind? And then it's like, all right, you're just basically throwing out of the Firefly Funhouse match, then we're going to an ad, and then he's like, is that all right? Going, what did I just watch? He's like, why are you there?
And wonderful,
you're getting paid.
Wonderful foreshadowing as well, because we got an ad for the Big Show's Netflix series just after that. And hold that thought, because it's going to play into Raw not too long after the main event. But in terms of this main event as well, Richie, I just think, and I hate to sound like Jim Cornette on this, but I think we're really damaging finishers with false finishes and with finishers being spammed as well. There was once upon a time nobody kicked out the F5. It was very much a conclusive move. Up to this point, really, the Claymore was quite well protected as well. But we had 4 Claymores, I think 3 F5s and 4 Germans as well. You guys just kicking out of this for no reason during the match, really. Even I think the first F5 got a 1 count.
Like I said, it's basically it's PlayStation booking and how you execute a match on there, whereby you just try and do your biggest move a couple of times and hope you get a pin out of it, and it's not a good thing to watch. And as I mentioned, there's no psychology to it. I was worried there for a second when you said you were going to go all Jim Cornette. You were going to say something vaguely racist, which I would have completely shut you down on. Will, but it's just bad. It makes Drew look like a beast, and he's slayed the beast, Brock Lesnar. Yeah. But ultimately, he's able to put a promo McIntyre. Lesnar, we know, how are they going to re-energize him? He's just going to come in and do the same thing again to somebody else down the line, looking angry, saying even less, and we're going to have a similar program. It doesn't work for me. And again, McIntyre would have absolutely benefited from having that match in front of people, and it's a real pity. He comes across as a decent skin. I watched the Chronicle on him there as well, just before I watched Night 2, and he comes across really well and really grateful for where he's at the moment, and I'm delighted for him. I would worry that he's going to be shoved down our throats so badly over the next while that we'll come out of this hating him.
Yeah, I didn't really care for him on Monday. I was very disappointed as well, Richie. We didn't get your idea from last week, which is a cutback maybe to Ibrox with a few people there, perhaps celebrating his win, or the Highlands of Scotland.
It happened in the Chronicle. In a way, they didn't go back to the Highlands of Scotland or have him on the big screen or anything like that, but they were showing his Rumble win. He was going in a car. He's like, "Oh, have you seen this?" And he started showing mobile phone footage of a pub back in Glasgow when he won the Rumble. The place was packed. It's basically like the Woolshed in town, where they would have had a night, and everybody went mental in there, and it looked like legitimately 150 or maybe more. It looked like a fairly busy pub.
Just use that footage.
They're all going mad in Glasgow. And when he initially held up the phone, I was really worried that he was going to show people that footage of, remember when England scored at a World Cup and it's like they show this big open bar and there's lots of pints going there. I was like, oh, Drew, don't tell me somebody sent you that thinking it was the fucking Royal Rumble moment. It's actually a bunch of England fans like 2 years ago. They'll feel really bad for him. But no, legitimately, it was that kind of thing. But again, it was one of those moments whereby it clearly meant a lot to him, but would have been made even better if there was, I don't know, circumstances, not a virus, are the reason why they can't have it there. But it holler back to my call, which is don't have this WrestleMania. Just pay off what you can now on TV and save it for down the line. Have SummerSlam mean more, because it really sucked the life out of the moment to see that you're ending WrestleMania again, even though you'd set aside for another few hours that there's nobody there. When your big climactic moment happens, and it happens in front of nobody, it's just, when you can hear like voices, Tom Phillips' voice and all that echoing through the room, you're like, oh, it's yeah, bless his heart.
And just on your finisher talk, Will, it's actually kind of symbolic of like wrestling now as well. I big AEW fan. I really enjoy it now, I have to say. But you look at a match often, and there's so many high spots, and it's just like, when does a plancha, like, it doesn't mean anything anymore. Everybody's doing it, or everybody's flying over the top ropes, and you're kind of getting all this shoved down your throat that, you know, a big move doesn't really mean anything anymore. In F5, we see that, you know, we see a big move like that. It should mean something. Those big moves should definitely be protected. Like, if you're kicking out of an F5, to me, it's like, oh, someone jumped up on the apron, caused interference for 5 seconds, and just gave you that second that you needed to kick out. Or you were too tired and you struggled and dragged across and were able to drape one hand across and they kicked out at the end. Because when you do that, like, and it's 3 or 4 or 5 finishers, like, there's no end to that. Like, you don't believe a finisher. There's no I know it's wrestling and it's make-believe, but there's no credibility to it anymore if you keep doing that. And it's like wrestling bookers are kind of booking themselves into a corner with that stuff. It's just like everything is bigger and better, and lads could end up doing, you know, a load of different high-flying moves, a load of different moves in a match, and it still doesn't finish the match, and there's a load of near falls. And I just think long-term, I think it suffers from booking like that. It's just like... Yeah. Now, like, why is it you can kick out of you can't kick out of an F5 when it's done once on Raw, but you can kick out 5 times at WrestleMania? Do you know what I mean?
Like, just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do it over and over again. Like, even the bump that Owens took in the Rollins match, whereby he took a bump onto the ring apron, and like at first they were like, oh Jesus, that's a rough one, and then he took it again, and you're like, he didn't need to do it twice. Like, it's bad enough doing it once, and if he manages to sell it well enough, then you're only believing more the impact of such a move. You don't need to keep doing something over and over to show that it's effective. Do it once, sell it well, and move on.
Mick, why don't we go to a match that had loads of good psychology? One of my favourites of the weekend, which was Charlotte Flair against Rhea Ripley. Again, this one almost had that kind of early finisher finish when the Riptide is hit, I think within 2 minutes of the match starting. But then after that, very kind of careful job done by Charlotte Flair, believable looking chops, going after the knee continually to eventually set up the figure 8. 20 minutes of pretty good action between these two. And what we were hoping for last week, Rhea Ripley, even in defeat, I think comes out of this looking really good.
Yeah, I look back at a couple of the like chop blocks and stuff like that, and they were vicious enough, like, and you're just thinking, geez, yeah, her knee actually could have buckled on that occasion. At least they played out a bit of a story. She went after her leg from the outset, stayed after it. Rhea Ripley was struggling to stand, struggling to get any offense as a result of that. You kind of had in your head, when you saw that happening early, you kind of had in your head, that's probably how it's going to finish off. I still think she lost a bit, but I still think she did tap out. At the end of the day, they could have done. She could have passed out or something like that. I just think she still tapped out in a big WrestleMania match, like which I just think something like that, maybe passing out or something like that. It's just a bit more, just leaves her with a bit more credibility. It was a very good match, loads of psychology to it. Again, I think it did struggle without the crowd, just from the fact that they're obviously two kind of fairly aggressive, kind of noisy characters in the ring, and you could hear everything that was going on in there. But no, it was hard to play out a match with a lot of psychology in that environment, but they did a pretty good job of it. The finish, I would have altered it a small bit.
Richie?
Yeah, on the noise of the two of them, it was much like certain women's tennis matches.
Sharapova.
Like, well, yeah, you feel like you've a lot of explaining to do if somebody walks in the room and asks what you're watching, because they're like, I was outside and I heard, you're like, and because they were just so loud, and I think overly so. I think, and it plays into the fact that Charlotte tapped out, or sorry, not Rhea tapped out to Charlotte, and whether or not that makes her still look strong. The fact that she was, like, we were talking about selling, she can sell and not necessarily show that it's being as hurtful as it is. I think Rhea almost oversold to a degree, and that's something probably somebody could have a word in her ear about, because it made her look like absolutely everything was agony to her, and it shouldn't be. Like, certain things can be agony to her, and certain, strikes to the knee can be really agony to her, but there's other ones where you can just go, like, do the Peter Griffin, you can manage your way around it a little bit better than she did, which is just everything is no.
She could possibly have looked at the Michaels Hogan match from 05 maybe before she went out, possibly.
Boring. But little things, like, they changed. I don't know if it was her call or their call. They changed her look so dramatically coming in. Like, she's somebody who would dress in black all the way along, after originally being a kind of Demi Bennett and kind of cookie cutter women's wrestler for a while. They gave her a distinctive look, and she looked like somebody who could, basically front a female version of the Misfits, and that's, all good. And then comes in like white and blue and a bit of gold, and you're like, oh, okay, fine, and looks like a completely different person. And then ends up tapping out when, again, like we made the call last week, we said that if she comes out of this looking strong, I think there's no harm done. But she's after tapping out to that shit figure eight on her biggest stage of all, after going in as champion and not leaving as champion. And I don't know, for somebody that they're trying to build and we're clearly putting a lot of steam behind for a while, the decision for me to have her tap like that, even though they'd worn down her knee throughout the match, I don't know, it didn't sit well for me as well, especially when you factor in that Baszler had been beaten the night before. It just kind of left a bad taste in the mouth for me.
Yeah, that's come up with a few of the questions that have been sent in to us. David Kent was in contact with us as well on Twitter. He says, think Charlotte was the right call given the amount of fresh matches it now can potentially bring up. Hopefully they're now keeping Shin as big win for a crowd. Otherwise, I'm very wary of that call. Just to take the Charlotte point, first of all, Mick, it does open up some very interesting opportunities for NXT. This coming Wednesday, they have their ladder match, which has been a mini tournament that's played out over the last 3 weeks or so. They've got it down to 6. They'll eventually get it down to 1, and then that person will get to challenge Charlotte. Potentially, if Charlotte stays around NXT for the next while, this makes their women's division entirely re-energized. Yeah,
they're obviously chasing AEW on Wednesday night with regards to the ratings. AEW, I think, have taped 6 weeks tapings in the can, basically, and they're going on holidays for that time, I think. Bringing someone like Charlotte there obviously brings massive credibility, brings a massive name. Obviously, like, not that NXT is all developmental, obviously have Balor and loads more faces that people know, but it just adds a bit more star power to it. It also means that their women's division is head and shoulders above AEW's as well, which gives them, that's kind of a nice little tick that they have ahead of them. It opens up some really good matches again. And yeah, just that bit of probably more star power to the women's division is probably something that's needed. They're probably going to stay. They're obviously have, not that they have live shows or anything like that, but they have a chance to maybe catch up on AEW over the next 4 to 6 weeks, and bringing her back is probably not a bad way of starting with that.
Richie, where does Rhea Ripley go from here then? Do you keep her on NXT or is it time to bring her up to the main roster?
I'd say she's probably already outgrown NXT. When you see that they've built that contenders match, you kind of see the strength and depth that they have as a women's division, and there are others that you could probably throw in there as well as regards names that would fit into that quite easily, who are in the developmental system as well, like your Scarlett Bordeaux's of this world. But I don't know, like, I genuinely don't know, like, if they move her up to Raw or SmackDown, like, SmackDown's women's division is such a mess at the moment, you kind of wonder how she'll fit in there. And with Raw's, like, do you put her straight in a feud with someone like Nia Jax? And if you do, like, you have to have her beat Nia Jax, which makes Nia Jax instantly look like a chump. So again, you're kind of not really wanting to be invested in a Nia Jax match down the line. So I don't know. Like, it's very much at a crossroads. I'd hope they'd have something decent in mind for her. I was kind of worried that there was no real follow-up to it last night, but sure, yeah, who knows with this company.
Yeah, I think SmackDown would be a good call. The only problem is she goes to SmackDown. You already have that very established storyline now, which is playing out, which we'll talk about in a few minutes with Bayley and also Banks. I just kind of wonder where you position her, but SmackDown might be the better location. It would definitely boost out their division if she was to move. Mick, Aleister Black against Bobby Lashley was what we expected it to be. Bobby Lashley once again gets to dominate a match, but he comes out looking like an absolute chump because he's got various times where he could finish this. He decides to keep going back to try and do more spears and more big moves. He gets hit with a black mass, and Aleister Black wins.
A classic one on the call. It was on Lana's call. He wanted to do another spear. It goes back to basic male psychology of trying to impress a woman, and that was his downfall. It's classic old school wrestling psychology. I think like you're just happy that Aleister Black number 1 was on the card, and you're happy that number 2 that he's able to get a win at WrestleMania. It wasn't a particularly good match or anything like that. You know what you're going to get with Lashley most of the times, but at least Aleister Black, it's a small bit of momentum. And has him moving, and again, it's a win for him at WrestleMania, because so often these lads come up and they're just jobbed out, or they're put in a bad spot, and they're made look pretty shit. At least he won a WrestleMania match anyway, and it gives some sort of springboard to build with.
Bobby Lashley, Richie, seems entirely pointless to me. He's now 3 years in the company next month after he returned after WrestleMania 3 years ago. He has done little or nothing since he came back in 2017. Really,
they had him, like, to be fair, we kind of say little or nothing, but that triangle with Rusev and Lana was a thing. Like, you look at the amount of views that was getting on YouTube, that's how they'll absolutely justify that storyline, saying it was popular and was bringing eyeballs to the product. So him being in that, I don't think is any harm. The fact that he's the most make-weight character in all of that, I think, says it all. Like, nobody, like, there's no personality behind him at all. I know they tried to add a bit of personality to him and had him say weird things about his sister initially when he came back. It just didn't work at all. I don't know if you can go back to him being the kind of killer that he was initially when he first broke through into the company and ended up in that match with Trump back in Detroit.
Well, like, he got to cuckold the guy here. He ends up winning eventually the feud, and he also ends up marrying the woman as well. And yet he looks no stronger after that, probably 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, but again, like, he's done all that, but he's the most forgettable element of all of it. Because you're still thinking about Lana and Rusev. You're thinking Lana's married to... Who's she married to? Oh, is Lashley? All right, okay, grand. You don't think that, what's Lashley going to do out of this? You're just like, surely he's going to get fucked over in some way and we'll move on from there. But it's just, I don't know. Like you said, he's such a nothing character at the moment. You kind of fear for how long he will be in the company. I'm sure there's ways to re-energize him, but at the moment he's kind of treading water.
Mick,
Fair play to Lana. She's carrying on this whole kind of thing. It's like kayfabe still exists. She's carrying it all on through her YouTube channel and Instagram and everything, that she's actually married to Lashley. And someone was on to me the other day. So what's the story? She's actually married to Lashley now. And I was just like, it's just easier to just go, yeah. She's just split from Rusev. She's married to Lashley.
Fair play to her. Like, there's plenty that wouldn't go to those lengths. There's plenty, like, your Sasha Bankses of this world who have their real names up as their, like, Instagram and all that. So fucking why not? Fair play to her.
The queen of kayfabe, despite the fact she lost her Russian accent and became an American and then became Russian again. She's keeping kayfabe real in 2020. Mick, moving on to an actual WrestleMania moment, which we had in the next one, which was Otis finally getting his revenge against Dolph Ziggler and that shady Sonya Deville as well. Mandy Rose coming out at the end of this match to help Otis out as well, and he gets his kiss and he gets to carry the girl out at the end.
Yeah, no, lads, this was my moment of the weekend, I have to say. Genuinely, you knew what was coming, and I still absolutely loved it. Again, it was one of the few things that, obviously, it would have benefited from the crowd, but I still thought it was class, even though there wasn't a crowd there, and even though you knew exactly what was coming. And just as I was getting ready to do this, I was thinking of WrestleMania 7 and Macho and Elizabeth, and the only sad part is, no, not sad, that you didn't have a bit of, like, a music playing in the background or something like that just to build it up. But I thought this was brilliant, and I actually thought it was a decent match, actually. You knew what was going to happen. I didn't think it was a bad match. You knew what you were going to get from it. I thoroughly enjoyed this, I have to say.
Yeah, I really like Otis as a performer. I think he's stood out head and shoulders, like what looked like it would be a pretty run-of-the-mill tag team coming up. Like, he's by far the star performer of the two of them. The story had roped people in. People are suckers for this kind of love interest kind of stuff. I think they pulled it off as well as they possibly could have done in front of a crowd. Like Mick says, like, it would have been absolutely amazing to have 60,000 people chanting Otis's name. Would have made him look like an absolute $1 million. And coming out of it, like, God knows what for him. Like, you know, I won't say he can deliver a promo, but he's got enough personality about him and enough enthusiasm about him that he can put over whatever he's doing. And to be put in this position is a very difficult one. Someone like Lashley is kind of, as you mentioned, struggling with that kind of thing, whereas Otis is just bought into a hook, line and sinker. And it shows when you buy into a gimmick and when you buy into a storyline yourself as a performer, it makes all the difference in the world, and it makes you all the more likable if you lean into it as much as someone like Otis has done. And I think he comes out of it the better of it. It would have been a beautiful moment if they had Love Lifts Us Up Where We Belong playing as he carries her off up the ramp into the sunset in Tampa. It wasn't to be. They made the best of what they could with this one, and yeah, I don't think anybody's displeased with this whatsoever.
Yeah,
that meme was going around, Will, as well. You know, the red-haired lady that was at WrestleMania 9 with tears in her eyes, the classic WrestleMania 7, that was going around to with kind of people are putting that meme up after the Otis match. I think it was the modern day equivalent to that, obviously on a lower scale, but I thought it was brilliant, I have to say.
Yeah, WrestleMania loves a kind of an 80s movie throwback as well. Officer and a Gentleman, pretty much the finish of this match. And I think as well, Richie, like everyone comes out of this looking good. I mean, Otis has a storyline now to build on. Mandy Rose comes out really well in that, you know, basically her 2-month build came right up to this point as well. Sonya Deville now gets something different to work at, where she's this kind of crafty heel. And Dolph Ziggler's been involved in the storyline for the last 2 months, when generally he's just bounced from kind of match to match with no real feud. This is one of those rare occasions where all 4 people have probably benefited from the last 2 months.
Yeah, absolutely. It's your ideal scenario as regards a WrestleMania storyline, in that everybody's involved coming in, everybody has their own little splinters going out from it, and everybody looks a little bit better for having taken part in it. So I think really well executed. One of those moments where they absolutely deserve a bit of praise.
I'm reliably informed as well, Will, that it was Dolph Ziggler's first singles match at WrestleMania in 16 years with the company.
Wow.
That's insane.
Yeah, that's nuts, like.
Two-time world champion Dolph Ziggler, we're mentioned there as well. Mick, in terms of the next match, I mentioned I fell asleep later on. I'm amazed I didn't fall asleep in what felt like probably I think it was 40 minutes all in all, from the ring entrances and the promo at the start to the end of this match. We had such high expectations. I was so let down by this. An absolute drudge to try and watch this Edge against Randy Orton.
Yeah, it went on. Probably 17-18 minutes would have been grand. Like, they weren't. It's almost like they were on top of the truck for about 15 minutes, like near the end. It was just going on so long. Spots that you felt should have been, you know, a minute or two or 5 minutes. It was just very strange. And what was really strange was in the boardroom area there in the performance center, that chain going through the ceiling. Did you see that?
Yeah.
It was just crazy. It's mad to think that you'd have, I don't know why they would have a chain on the ceiling of a boardroom. But there were just several things were just very strange about the match. It's just, for 2 like real experienced workers, you'd imagine they would have said, just give us 20 minutes or whatever, and we'll do this. The kind of the hanging thing was a bit odd as well, and a bit tasteless to say the least.
It reminded me of, first of all, Bossman and Undertaker.
Bossman and 15, yeah.
And then it reminded me of the fact that you brought up Chris Benoit when we were talking about WrestleMania moments last week. And considering the Dark Side of the Ring on Vice had only aired a week before, they did the exact same thing in this. I thought it was really tasteless.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you mentioned actually about the Bossman thing. I bought WrestleMania 15 on video maybe a month after. I didn't see it live, and I only found out about 10 years later, I'd say, about the hanging thing after, because it was all dubbed out of the video basically. So I only found out on YouTube about maybe about 10 years ago, about 10 years after, and just how mad that was at the time. Back then, maybe not as taboo as it is now. Like,
no. I remember. I didn't watch it at the time, but I remember watching it a few years afterwards. And it's that kind of moment in the crowd where everybody goes quiet and everybody knows this actually isn't fucking on. I don't think anybody was happy with how that angle was executed. And afterwards as well, there was a definite sense in the building where they're like, whoa, that's no. And even for what? That was what, 99? For a crowd, for a crowd to be that savvy. That stuff even happened, like the crucifixion angle that Kurt Angle apparently was pissed off about, that Sandman was part of with Raven in ECW. Like, that didn't get over in front of the Philadelphia crowd because it was way too like religious and out there. So like that kind of thing is too far, and I think crowds have a decent knowledge of what is too far in that kind of respect. But yeah, this was just like way too long. There was a good joke I saw knocking around on Twitter there yesterday saying Triple H had tears in his eyes as he handed over the reins to the unnecessarily long match of the year over to these two lads, because it was that like 15 minutes and that could have been done quite easily. I don't know why they felt the need to go, 35, 36 minutes. Like, it was just way too long. I get it. We talked about the Firefly match and the Boneyard match in that they needed to make the most of their surroundings. They had this entire performance center to play with. Why not actually go and play with it? And they did. And that's, to a degree, fair enough. But do it within a shorter time frame. You didn't need to go on for 36 minutes. People always complain about Randy Orton matches before being boring or being unwatchable. Like, this isn't going to do him any favors as regards that reputation.
Second longest match in WrestleMania history after the Iron Man match.
Wow.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
and for what as well? Like,
yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, didn't need half that time. It absolutely just dragged. It's a pity as well because we got the finish that we kind of wanted. This is exactly what we're expecting. It was going to be a concerto, almost a complete mirror of what happened 2 months ago when Randy Orton hit Edge. So we got the satisfying finish, but I'll admit by the finish I just wanted to be over.
Yeah, I'm the same. Yeah. It was just the life was totally sucked out. Like, you're lucky. We're probably lucky if that had been in front of an audience. Only that was the Firefly Funhouse match following it, the crowd would have been probably totally dead just because the life would have been totally sucked out of him by the time it came. And I'm not surprised. I'm very surprised actually you didn't fall asleep during it. Your timing was a bit off, but yeah, it's 36 minutes and there's no memory. There's nothing really that you're going to stand out memory you're going to have from it and think, oh, at least that was cool. Everything really just dragged.
Only one cool moment, Richie, before we move off this match was actually the start where Randy Orton poses as a cameraman in the full black gear and then he hops in because the Edge is basically watching to see where Randy's going to come out at the entranceway. I actually thought that was a pretty good spot to start the match at least.
Weirdly, what I would watch the untold story of Angle and Michaels at WrestleMania 21, which I really should have mentioned last week as one of my favorite WrestleMania matches because that was spectacular. But Michaels was talking about in the lead in and the build to that match, one of the things he did was pose as a cameraman and then takes all the gear off and gives sweet chin music to Angle in the build up to it. And you're like, all right, yeah. And Michael says, I just love anything where I get to dress up and be silly and act as a kind of a different character. And apparently it was Michaels who was the agent essentially for this match and helped put it all together. So that was, I think, a little bit of a nod and a wink to what had gone before as regards Michaels. But yeah, I don't know. It's just too long. Just wait. That's the only thing you can really say for it. Way too long. I don't think anybody comes off the better for it.
Funnily enough, when a match starts with a big spot like that, you actually have a reason for it not to go on long. Because you've started with a big spot. There's obviously not a crowd there, but there's a big spot. Everyone's energized. In theory, you should be saying Edge is after taking an RKO early in this match. It could conceivably be over after 20 minutes because he's bollocks by the end of the match. That's how you should be thinking. But instead of that, they just drag the shit out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, problem is an RKO out of nowhere. You're now nearly expecting an RKO out of nowhere at this stage, at some stage in the match. Mick, thankfully the next match was nice and short. We had the Street Profits who have really earned their cash over the last few weeks, as we'll see on Raw when they carried about half an hour of the show the next night as well. But again, there was going to be no doubt about the result in this one. Thankfully it was short with some good spots. They beat Garza and Austin Theory, and we got Bianca Belair coming back into WrestleMania at the end of it as well.
Yeah, there could only really be one result here, given the way the other partnership was kind of thrown together. They got a couple of good, decent moments in, lots of good offense, lots of kind of memorable moments, and are getting a bit of a run now. If you're going to do a short match, it should be something like this at least, where a team gets a few good spots, keeps their momentum, and they've kind of brought it on. You're probably going to go in and talk about Raw, but they've brought the momentum over from WrestleMania as well. So all in all, it was, and Bianca Belair coming into the fold as well looks like a very, very positive development.
Richie, can I bring in Raw into this? Because I think this is like basically a continuous story. We have a rematch between exactly the two teams again the next night. We get pretty much exactly the same match. I'm surprised that they got time to even change the ring gear to come back out and do this again. And then we got Bianca Belair fighting Zelina Vega, and then we got a 6-person intergender tag finish as well. So basically we had 4 matches between this group of 6 people over the course of 2 nights. I guess they've got some value out of Austin Theory here, and the upshot of it is we know Bianca Belair is now coming in and is somewhat aligned with her husband Montez Ford, and Dawkins is tag team partner with the Street Profits. I guess Bianca Belair coming in is probably the story of the 2 nights.
It is, and it's most welcome. And again, we touched on it with Rhea Ripley. It's how she's used from here on in is going to be the crucial thing, because used right, she's brilliant. For somebody who's so, like, she's still so young, still in her early 20s, I think, relatively new as regards to the business, but has picked it up like nobody's business. Like, mentioned Kurt Angle, like I think Triple H had mentioned her as being somebody who just had an instant aptitude for what goes on in and out of the ring. She can cut a promo. That stuff that she did with Charlotte and lead into her match with Rhea Ripley, weirdly enough, for Mania, was great. I've really enjoyed her work over the past 2 years. She was kind of spinning her wheels a little bit in NXT. They shifted her out of the cycle of title matches, which I guess she probably needed to do, and then didn't know what to do with her. We're rebuilding her again, and now she's found a way up to Raw. If they use her right, like, they can tap into something excellent with her. You've enough reason to fear that they won't, but fingers crossed Bianca Belair is the main player for a few years to come.
Mick, this could have been a lot worse. I mean, originally this match was meant to be Rey Mysterio against Andrade, which I think would have been entertaining, even though we've seen it 46 million times at this stage. Eventually it breaks off into a tag team match. They had to rework it when Andrade picked up an injury, and we ended up with this. This could have been an awful lot worse than what we actually got in the finish. Yeah,
it could have been way worse, in fairness. This was a bit of welcome, kind of, not relief almost, but it was something a little different, considering what it came after. Like, it came after where you just needed to be picked up a little bit. It was very simple, very effective, and it got the job done, and kind of it got you on an even keel going back into what was probably the best match over the two, or the best moment over the 2 nights.
Richie, our penultimate title match of WrestleMania 36 then followed, and we have the storyline very nicely simmering now. The trigger wasn't entirely pulled. Bayley gets away with her title. Sasha Banks is holding her title, which is kind of the enduring image of the final stages of this match, and it took Banks coming back in to ensure that Bayley gets the victory. We're very much on the road now to this feud actually happening.
Yeah, and I think it's probably best that they didn't pull the trigger on the night. We do come away with that question mark of what if and what's going to come of this relationship down the line. The right person probably won the match from that respect, although made a decent case for Naomi, I thought, last week. But if you're going to have these two split up, you have to have the championship at the centre of it. And as we mentioned before, the notion of them working in the opposite positions that they did when they were back in NXT as regards heel and face just is a really good thing for me, and I'm looking forward to seeing the singles match that's going to come from this, because if they are allowed to do what they were allowed to do at their takeover special, then we've got a really decent matchup coming and a really decent build to it as well, because the two of them can actually build a storyline, to be fair.
Has a turn ever taken as long to come as this? It's mad in the world of wrestling where the trigger is always pulled far too soon. This has dragged on way longer, I think, than anyone expected. Like, you're expecting the turn maybe about the guts of about a year and a half ago almost, and it's turned the other way now, and you're finally getting the payoff so far down the line, which is really unlike anything that usually happens in wrestling.
Do you know what? I think Sasha Banks actually has a lot to do with that. When she had her sabbatical and came back, I think now our boy Rovert on Twitter would know a lot better than I do, but he seemed to allude to it more than once, that she came back in with a certain deal of creative control, that they weren't necessarily mad at her time away, that she came in saying that she wanted to do X, Y, and Z, and these were the kind of people that she wanted to work with. I would think that she'd have enough say-so over this storyline to say, no, just when you think they're ready. And having Pritchard actually on as a producer of SmackDown probably helps along with that. Just when, because you always hear him saying as well about builds and the arcs of feuds, is that when you think they're ready, pull it back a little bit more, but keep them waiting. So then when you do actually hit them with it, it's going to be explosive. And they might be waiting to get back in front of people for this to happen. And there are umpteen ways to try and do that. But if that's what they are doing, fair play, because I'm okay with the longer arc and the kind of questions of when's something going to hit. You just don't want to hit that point, which is the danger point of people gone past caring, and then when it does happen, you're like, all right, Graham, whatever. But I think they're okay for now, and I think the build to distance actually be really, really enjoyable.
Mick, just want to give Lacey Evans a bit of credit here as well, because she had a good showing during the match. So did Naomi as well. Kind of, they balanced out the match reasonably well. But Evans has gone from having the really annoying walk down and slowing everything down last year to 12 months later, she's putting in a pretty credible performance. She's come on a lot from WrestleMania 35 to 36.
Yeah, it's funny. They just gave her a bit too much too soon. Like, we talked about it last week. Like, that never should have been Becky's first feud as champion. No way. It was the wrong feud for Becky because it wasn't a big enough feud. And it was the wrong feud for Lacey Evans because it was just too much too soon. She was very raw, still very raw at the time. She's had a good year or so on the main roster now, way more experience, and just seems to have kind of ironed out a couple of those kinks. Like, she's by no means perfect, but she's far more watchable now than she was a year ago anyway, and is in a better position to go on and like start progressing a bit now. It was just a bit too much too soon, I think, then.
Firefly Funhouse, in terms of, I think this was probably the climax of the entire weekend. For me, this was great. I get the impression from Richie he's not as big a fan maybe as I was of the Firefly Funhouse. Very difficult to explain this to the viewers and listeners in terms of what happened. Probably the best advice would be to go and watch it.
Go on, Will. Go on and explain it to people.
It's all about... Okay, so the basic storyline here is that 6 years ago...
He's going to try.
I'm going to give this a go. 6 years ago, John Cena went up against Bray Wyatt when Bray Wyatt was absolutely white hot going into the match. Huge connection with the fans. Everyone was expecting that John Cena was going to do a job and make a new star out of Bray Wyatt. In the end, it didn't happen. And Bray Wyatt, since then, has pretty much had to struggle through 5 to 6 years of losing all of the major feuds that he's been involved in. He was reborn last year as The Fiend, really got over again with the crowd, despite being a heel for the entire period of this, and some very carefully crafted promos where he basically came up with an entire virtual world of his own, which was inhabited with different kind of artifacts of his career up till now, which is entirely in his own mind. So basically what we got was the Firefly Funhouse concept, which is like Bray Wyatt being the bad guy in, like a boss almost, in a computer game level, where John Cena had to be brought through kind of all these moments of his career. So we got loads of different bits of nostalgia and very funny takes on it as well, from John Cena's first ever match where he came out to challenge Kurt Angle, to his Ruthless Aggression era, through to his rapping phase, and then bring us right through into their match at WrestleMania 30. And basically we got a lot of what felt like very shoot talk from Bray Wyatt during it as well, saying this was meant to be my moment, you've been the golden goose all along and handed all the opportunities. And then Cena is psychologically taken through trying to attack him, but of course can't hit the Bray Wyatt Mr. Rogers character because he's not really there. And then he transforms into The Fiend after the chair spot from WrestleMania 30. We get a nice little moment with the throwback to the NWO and the breakdown of kind of Hulk Hogan and Bischoff at that point as well, playing into the fact that basically John Cena's always been what Vinnie Mac wanted, which was a big muscly guy, and his ego took over his career throughout, and now it's the moment for The Fiend. It ends then with The Fiend eventually putting on the mandible claw, getting his sister Abigail, and winning the match, or at least that's what seemed to have happened. Is that a fair enough summation of what happened during the match?
I think you've nailed it there, Will, to be fair. Yeah, absolutely nailed it. If nothing else, what they've done here is re-energized that Fiend character and the Bray Wyatt character generally amazingly well, and probably as perfectly as they could have done. And God bless John Cena, who sacrificed himself in almost every aspect to make that happen. That man, for what he's done for that character, deserves a medal, because he bought into that and the concept of that match wholeheartedly. There's like umpteen costume changes involved in it, and there's questionable bits and pieces going on. He went, yeah, okay, I'll do that, and was enthusiastic about it, lent into it, and has 100% erased everything that went on with The Fiend and Goldberg back in Saudi Arabia, because that's all people are going to talk about coming out of WrestleMania is the Firefly Funhouse match.
Nick?
Yeah, it's funny. All the grievances and been pissed off at different things with Wyatt over the last few years, and been pissed off that maybe Cena didn't turn and all this. I felt like if you were a fan and you're following wrestling for the last 15 or 20 years, I actually felt like you were rewarded in this match, because you watch it the first time, even if you didn't know what was going on, you'd still think it was cool. But if you knew the ins and outs of it, and the NWO maybe saying that it was kind of basically why didn't Cena ever turn heel? Hogan turned heel, it changed his career. Cena never turned heel, just kind of stayed on that kind of even keel the whole way through. I kind of felt like the fan was almost rewarded for being knowledgeable about wrestling, reading about wrestling, knowing what's going on and that kind of thing. And I thought that was brilliant, I have to say. There's so many little... There's a brilliant article up online. I can't even think of where I read it. Someone tweeted out of basically all the references going on through the Firefly Funhouse match. I don't know if you call it a match. It was more of an experience than a match. But everything, even down to the smallest detail, had a meaning. Something to do with Cena's career, something to do with Wyatt's career, something to do with a part of Wyatt's career. I just thought it was excellently done. It wasn't a match. It was a short film breaking down Cena's career and breaking down Wyatt's career. And Yeah, it was brilliant. Maybe not for the purists because it wasn't a match per se, but there was just so much going on in it. Even like the Brie Bella reference, there was just so many little bits to it. I thought it was class. I thought they absolutely nailed it. In fairness, I thought it was. If you're looking for a WrestleMania moment or something you're going to remember, I think anybody that watched that will never forget it.
The fact that it's a match played out through the prism of the mind of a character is just like, it's concept beyond what I thought that company was capable of, and I just have to commend them for that. Again, what was mentioned earlier on, not something you can go back to every couple of pay-per-views, but I think this one was just so well executed. They can happy enough leave it alone and come back to it or something similar down the line. But fair play to John Cena for absolutely going through with it, and fair play to Vinny for okaying a puppet of himself saying this is good shit, which I thought was good crack as well.
Just a different thing as well. Like, I thought it was like, we talked about did Cena and Wyatt need to be a championship match? Should it have been a championship match with Cena going for the record and that type of thing? Like, it could never have been a championship match when you look at what it turned out to be. So I don't know if it was a master plan. It probably wasn't, to take the title off him with the view to this happening. But this was an absolute masterpiece. Leaves you have that sympathy for Cena. I don't like him disappearing at the end. That leaves so many things. Is that the end of his career? Is that him disappearing for 9 months and coming back and being a heel? I think it just leaves so many endless possibilities.
Yeah, intriguing as well that we kind of got that very crucial moment where John Cena could have went left or right when he had the chair in his hand at WrestleMania 30. He could have hit Bray Wyatt and effectively given Bray Wyatt the win by kind of embracing the potential darker side to his character. Interesting, he swung the chair this time and didn't hit him because obviously Bray Wyatt disappears as part of this. But yeah, a lot of kind of layered things happening during it. It brings me around, Richie, to one of Dave Hanratty's points as well on Twitter. He said, these more abstract cinematic style encounters, yes or no, who might it suit? We kind of talked about The Undertaker earlier on, and is it worth indulging this in such a weekend as we've just had? I think this was just perfect for circumstance as well, these two matches, Rich.
These two matches, and in particular with Cena and Wyatt, those two characters, I think lent themselves perfectly to that concept. It's not for, in every way imaginable, it's not for everyone. Like, not every fan is going to enjoy that kind of experience, and again, not every character or performer is going to lend themselves to being part of it either. But I think they managed to hit the sweet spot with this one, and like, I can only praise them. Not necessarily my cup of tea, but I can only praise them for managing to execute it as well as they did.
As long as they don't turn it into like a Hell in a Cell, where it's every couple of months. Do you know what I mean? If they're really selective of when they use it, it could be brilliant. And if it's with the right type of character, and maybe you could see a Firefly Funhouse match in a couple of years where the tables are turned and it's Wyatt that has to go through this experience and something like this. Do you know what I mean? But like, if they're really selective with it, it could work beautifully.
Yeah, I didn't want to misquote Matt Hardy, so I pulled up his tweet from Sunday. When it comes to all this, he says, cinematic wrestling now being the talk of the town, it makes me much prouder of the final deletion, which happened almost 4 years ago. I'm grateful for the time I spent in Impact Wrestling. So despite all of the rows that those two guys have had over all this, and also Matt Hardy had said earlier about, thanks for the kind words, guys and gals. Strongest I have ever been put over it as a singles competitor on WrestleMania. Ironically, though, I now compete for AEW Wrestling. See you Wednesday 8 p.m. on TNT. So obviously he's staying entirely in his character, but I think over these two nights, like particularly with the Boneyard match, Richie, we saw Borash's fingerprints all over this. He was in Impact 4 years ago when the final deletion happened, and it's kind of funny, a week or two after Matt Hardy has left, we get the two type of matches that would have probably put broken Matt Hardy over in WWE.
Yeah, they would have done, and it would have been absolutely the perfect environment for him, but not to be. But as regards doing it this way, they've done it perfectly. Triple H has actually mentioned before, because he's talked about them being away from crowds and having no people there, that these types of matches might actually become, quote unquote, the new normal, and that we could see more scope to do things in a more abstract kind of way. So maybe Dave's onto something when he tweets asking us that, because I think Triple H has laid the groundwork for it to be the case that we could see more offsite things, more overly produced things, because like they've done it before. Like to some degree, like 24/7 matches are off-site, pre-produced kind of matches. Like we talked about the one involving R-Truth a couple of weeks ago, being in the car and jumping, like those little things. It's just managing to extrapolate that and managing to add different layers to it and taking it to the level that they did on Saturday night, and they're the talk of the town for it.
Mick, when it comes to this WrestleMania, I know I sent you a meme that I spotted yesterday about this. It was like, it wasn't a great WrestleMania, it wasn't a bad WrestleMania, it was a WrestleMania. How do you rate it now that we've talked about the 16 matches we had?
Yeah, you'll remember you'll remember the Boneyard match, and you'll remember the Firefly Funhouse match. You won't remember that much else aside from that. Maybe this will be the moment or the genesis of when maybe wrestling starts going in a different direction. Obviously, you were saying the Ultimate Deletion match was 4 years ago, but when the WWE start properly embracing something like this and putting some real time and energy into it, that's when it's going to get real kind of mainstream coverage. So maybe this will be the genesis of that kind of stuff become not happening too regular, but different concept, different ideas. To me, it'd probably be something like maybe a 5.5 out of 10 or something like that. Barring those couple of like big kind of moments, like a lot of the undercard was poor enough kind of filler. I think you need to have 6 to 7 kind of memorable matches / moments, and I'd say you're looking at maybe 3 or 4 moments and 2 or 3 kind of matches. I just hope, as Richie said, that they don't ram Drew McIntyre down our throats either. Like, he can be a fighting champion, but like just don't overexpose him. Like, at the end of the day, he's champion. Not that it should be an attraction, but it should be a big deal when he defends his belt. So like, he shouldn't be always defending his belt, or it kind of becomes, I don't know. It should be, because you want to see it maybe every couple of weeks rather than every week, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so a big show coming back there on Raw in that losing effort after 8 minutes against Drew McIntyre after challenging him soon after the match. We also had Nia Jax make her comeback, and she won on the night as well. We know Bianca Belair has now gone up to the main roster and onto Raw as well. That's pretty much all you missed in Raw. As we say, 6% new footage is pretty much what you got. A lot of recaps from WrestleMania the night before. Mick, you mentioned already AEW have got like 6 weeks of taping. They're all the way up to their main pay-per-view of the year. They're ready to go. They've got this TNT title series, which is going to be a mini tournament, all planned out and taped over the next few weeks. They use their 2 or 3 weeks very productively. By all reports, WWE have no fresh material beyond NXT this week. It's going to create quite a challenge to even get 2 hours of SmackDown this week.
It's going to create a massive challenge, and like, they don't have anything in the bank. Like, AEW have all this in the bank, and at least can go off and plan new storylines and let like players go home safely or do whatever they need to do by the time hopefully we get the other side of this virus. If it goes into total lockdown or something like where they can't actually produce a show, they're going to be under pressure. It's going to be, they might have to take a break, and it could be an enforced break with no backup plan in place. Which if I know Vince McMahon from like television over the last 20 years, this would absolutely destroy him if there's no plan in place and AEW were to go unopposed against NXT maybe on a Wednesday night, or they don't have the Monday night product and the fictional kind of longest running show in Monday night history or
episodic
TV history.
Yeah,
episodic history. Sorry, if he ends up losing that. But it's just funny, yeah. See, the AEW were in a good spot in that they'd no big pay-per-view, they'd no big payoff, shall we say, whereas everything in WWE went towards getting WrestleMania in the can and getting this over and having a captive audience on that Saturday and the Sunday night, and they could pay for it in the weeks and months to come. It'll be interesting to see. It'd be interesting to see how often or what I don't know what they're going to do, because it's going to be very hard to work it that you would be able to get that much footage done in a really short space of time, and it could be a very short window that they have.
Yeah, particularly if they have to work outside Florida, which appears to be the case at the moment. They're going to have to probably find a state who will allow them to tape probably in very restricted circumstances and put a lot of TV together very quickly. Because whatever about SmackDown, which is 2 hours, Raw, which is 3 hours, unless you're going to put out classic matches again to fill 20-minute blocks, that's a lot of TV to fill on a given week.
Yeah, it's funny, just as you were saying that, and I was listening to an interview with Dana White this morning, and he was like, we can't just shut down, we've got to keep going. And he's like, look at Vince McMahon, he kept going. And he's just thinking, when you were talking there, Vinny could be ringing him in the background, and there could be TV tapings on some remote island somewhere, and there could be this agreement between UFC and WWE, and there could be a payoff then with someone from WWE going to UFC and someone else coming back likewise, which has happened already. But it's just mad to see like the two meanest, greediest bastards there probably are on the planet are the only two that are left standing and trying to operate as normal during all this.
Yeah, it feels pretty sick, like the UFC news today, this idea that they've secured an island, which they're not saying where it is, but they're building a facility currently where they can keep monthly pay-per-views going on in UFC, despite nature telling you just to stop.
Yeah, and it's an unbelievable card they've put for the April 18th card. It's a savage card. Obviously, did to remake the main event with Justin Gaethje coming in instead of Khabib, because Khabib is in Russia. But it's an entirely stacked undercard as well. Uriah Hall is on the undercard of Francis Ngannou. Big women's matches, the co-main event. It's a quality card, and he's basically saying they're going to churn out, maybe not that type of quality, but they're going to churn out like really good cards every couple of weeks. And it's just him, and it's the same as McMahon. He's seeing that there's nothing else on, and he's seeing that he's going to have the most captive audience that is possible. It's just pure greed, really.
Ratings, baby, ratings. In terms of this week, we've a fair idea what's going to happen on AEW. They're going to kick off this TNT title tournament. We know that Chris Jericho is going to be on commentary, along with Tony this week for AEW. Should be a pretty good show coming up on Wednesday. And up against that, NXT are going to have the intrigue of Charlotte Flair probably appearing on NXT ahead of this number one contenders ladder match. And we also finally get the payoff 3 years on for Gargano against Ciampa. Again, a pity this didn't happen at TakeOver Tampa Bay, but finally we get what should be the last leg of this saga, and what feels like a kind of a loser leaves town kind of thing as well. I get a sneaky feeling that Ciampa wins and Gargano goes up to the main roster, but finally we're getting the payoff, Mick.
Yeah, it's a long time coming, isn't it? In fairness, it is a long time coming, and it's ideal for them. Probably Charlotte will probably appear, I'd imagine, or could appear anyway, and they're going to be going up against AEW in the TNT kind of championship tournament as well. So it's going to be interesting. That it's the payoff it's amazing. Thing even we were just talking about Sasha and Bayley earlier. It's been so long coming. It's been like so long coming, longer than you could even believe. But I have a sneaking suspicion that your prediction will come true. It kind of makes sense at this stage. It would be the logical kind of scenario.
It is a pity as well. Like, we had the DIY breakdown, and we had a year of fantastic feud up to when they were originally going to fight, and then Ciampa gets the injury, which is very unfortunate. Then last year it fell apart very late on when it looked like it was going to be the main event to take over before WrestleMania as well. They seem to be cursed, because this year then you've got the empty arena as well. Has it lost anything in terms of the luster, just the fact that it has dragged on as long as it had? Maybe it's not quite as hot as it was 2 years ago?
It's kind of like Tony and Khabib, actually, now that you say it. Everybody wanted it, and they wanted it, and there's only a certain amount of times that the rug can get pulled underneath from underneath your feet. It just kind of loses the intrigue a bit. And I'd say that could be the same when Khabib and Tony eventually fight. They were supposed to fight at 249 as well. But you still know you're going to get... You still know what you're going to get. You're going to get like a very, very good quality, between 4 and 5 stars invariably anytime they meet. So while a bit of the intrigue might be gone, you know what you're going to get. You know you're going to be happy. You know you're going to be happy watching it. You know you're going to be entertained. So while it loses a bit of intrigue, you're still going to get that wow kind of value out of it as well.
Well, look, I'm looking forward to it. Tommaso Ciampa potentially against Adam Cole further down the line as well. NXT still looks like a red hot show and well worth watching over the next while, even though last week was maybe a little bit of a disappointment. They've had to just spread out their takeover card over a month to get around this taping problem as well. Mick, it's been great to have you on over the last couple of weeks. Looking forward to WrestleMania and looking back to WrestleMania as well. Mick's probably going to join us, I'd imagine, further down the track on the podcast as well. Keep your questions coming into us. Tweet us at Off the Ball with any questions you've got ahead of next week's podcast. Richie and I will be back next week to take a look at what happens on NXT and AEW on Wednesday night of this week. SmackDown this Friday as well. Going to be intriguing to see what actually happens. And then Raw next week, which is not taped as yet. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see you back on the Off the Top Rope podcast next week. Thanks for listening.